What's going on, everybody? This is the blockchain backer bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we're going to be taking a peek at the Bitcoin price chart, studying what's been going on over the last 2.5 months with this price action. I said earlier this week that we actually wouldn't come back to the Bitcoin price chart again until something broke out of here, but I actually had things I wanted to talk about in here, so we're going to. I have spent my morning just staring at this structure that's been happening here for Bitcoin, as we've been talking about for the last several weeks. We were looking for a long liquidation to happen to take out the leverage price action in here, or the leverage margin. We got it. Prices have held a higher low at this point based on this structure of how it has played out previously in other assets. The things that we've seen happen in here is that prices work up, then head up here, and then whoop right back down again. Now, personally, for me, that's not the most favorable outcome I'd like to see here for Bitcoin, because that actually screams there's still like years left of this bear market in Bitcoin. Does mean we get some kind of relief to happen in here, but it still says there's years left in this thing. Now, there would be many who disagree with this analysis, and I've peek around there on Twitter saying that this is a bear flag, and we're going to break down in here. We're going to head down to 15 to 17,000, and then off into a bull run we get to go. Now, we'll touch topics on it, but I do not think that is what is happening here. To each their own, to come up with their own conclusion, but I'll show it again here in this video later, that if we go take out that low right in there, we actually do very significant structural damage to the price chart, which is why I don't believe if we head down here that we actually start a new bull run. It would actually cause bigger, deeper problems for Bitcoin. And I think there's a lot of people who are bullish on Bitcoin long term, but they're cheering for this maybe because they sold in here and they really want to be able to buy prices for a little bit lower than what they did. Essentially, after the move came, the torture came, sold it down here. They want to be able to buy it for a cheaper price than they sold it at and not buy at a higher price. That could be wrong. That could be a wrong assessment that I have, but based on what I've seen around on Twitter, it does appear that even though people are screaming for lower prices and providing every type of fundamental narrative news reason on why we have to set a new low, the reality is people still want to buy that dip regardless of the fundamental news. So I'm not sure if it's just kind of like they're convincing themselves that we have to have a new low because of all these fundamental things, but that they still want to buy the dip regardless if it just comes. But we'll clean this back up really quick. And this is what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. And so long as if we do hold this price here at $20,700, this is still the same thing that I see happening over here on Bitcoin, but it would make me very, very nervous once we started getting much closer to $40,000 that we would actually just turn over on ourselves very quickly. So while Bitcoin still sits at or above 20,700, this is the thing I'm looking at. I'm not thrilled about it, but it's what I see. But is there any chance that we are actually already in Wyckoff accumulation? That this is not the scenario that's going to be playing out in here, and that we've already done a majority of the Wyckoff accumulation in here, and we're now in our final phase of the accumulation for a much more healthier style recovery to come in here. And I think a lot of that's going to get determined on whether or not we crack through 20,700. So it's kind of a mixed bag of feelings, right? Like as long as we're holding that 20,700, it's like, cool, man. We've got like a ticket that looks good to head up. But if we crack through 20,700, it starts becoming the worry of, all right, fingers crossed, are we doing Wyckoff accumulation in here? Or have we broken through a bear flag that is getting ready to tumble down significantly lower? And that's the worry that comes if we do crack through 20,700 is which one are we doing? Now, my thought process is that Bitcoin has already bottomed. If we were to set new lows on the Bitcoin market cap chart, we would lose a lot of things. First of all, we'd lose the previous all-time high, which has behaved as a perfect support. We'd also lose the structure of what Bitcoin has played out like this entire time of a completed bear market since October, November, all the way down. The structure, the capitulation, everything of the way it has played out, we'd lose all of that. And even if we go back to our fractal of how this has behaved, we even pulled back to the same levels of what a completed bear market looks like into these areas in here, pulling back just like we did in the past, with our breakout happening similarly as well. The only real difference on this chart is really how high the price got. There was massive distribution that took place during Wall Street bets, during laser eyes, diamond hands. Retail investors were getting dumped on as they were getting marketed heavily. So some major sellers, some major players were in here dumping on retail, preventing prices from going substantially higher. But Coinbase IPO'd on the day of the literal top. And then afterwards, price really started behaving the exact same all the way down. So to dip any lower would mean that we lose the all-time high. We lose what happens at ending phases of capitulations. In addition, we'd also be losing our final Fibonacci retracement level in here, which is the 0.786, which is exactly what we pulled back to in here. So a dip lower breaks everything. It breaks the fractals. It breaks the all-time high. It breaks the last Fibonacci retracement. There's a lot of damage that gets done by it heading lower. So my thoughts are, we're not going lower. And if we are, those who are planning on buying the dip are buying after major breakdowns of what we've seen before. We've exceeded Fibonacci's, we've exceeded the all-time high, we've broken away from fractals, we're just crashing. And I think a lot of people are waiting for this moment to come that, if we use all of these indicators, suggest it seems unlikely. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but it sure would seem unlikely. But we know that the structure that we have right in here right now, if this does hold here at 20,700 and the price works up like this, what we see historically is that these things do fall. And then they just keep on going and going and going. So is it any way remotely possible that we're not doing that and that we are going to break through 20,700? I could tell you, I would have thought the short squeeze would have come by now. I think we're on day 5. So yes, it's been 5 days since we had the long liquidation. Still waiting on if a short liquidation is going to come out of here. We haven't seen it yet. But could it be that we're already in Wyckoff accumulation right now and we're working on our spring right now, in which a spring does have another dip? It would take out 20,700, but it would have a more healthy reversal structure, increasing the odds that we're not going to just get completely destroyed up here in 40,000 and roll over, but that our structure mirrors that more of what does happen at bottoms and at reversals. And we're in long-term accumulation in here for prices to have a more healthy ride back up. But of course, there's dangers, right? There's concerns that happen out there because of the structure that it's actually making, that it looks awfully similar to each of these individual structures that eventually ended up breaking down and heading lower, right? Essentially coming in and hitting the top here a few times, heading back down to the lows, and then eventually it just breaks through and heads straight on down. And so while we're making this type of structure, that's the worry, right? You get through here, then what are we doing? We're just bear flagging again. The thing falls again. This thing was dumb. It's just still a crashing asset in here. But the challenge comes in this moment, and I'm going to show you why here. And we'll zoom out a little bit. We'll put ourselves on the weekly time frame too. Is that every time that Bitcoin has gotten dipped into oversold, so we'll put a little box here to show every time that Bitcoin went oversold, this marked the bottom of the bear market on the weekly time frame in here. So we know that Bitcoin definitely dipped into oversold, and we can put a line right here to show at that exact moment that was the actual bottom of Bitcoin's bear market. And over here, when we dipped into oversold, that also was the bottom of Bitcoin's bear market right in here. So as we've dipped down into these moments, it was like, all right, well, let's look to see if we can get the bottom. But as we can clearly see in here, this structure is looking awfully familiar to the scary ones that we've had previously that eventually just broke down and went lower. But as we've been observing with Bitcoin's ending in here and how we've been following similar bear market fractals from the all-time high that occurred in the depths of bear markets, that our all-time high was acting as if we were very deep into an actual bear market already, including our weekly RSIs during this time period, that our exciting time period had come previously. And that even here in our time period, that the excitement was actually back here, and that even the strength of the market was not oversold, but more so of that we're in the depths of a bear market in here and not in the extreme euphoria. And so if we kind of assess how this ending happened and how this all looked in here by heading back to the 2014-2015 bottom, you can almost draw the same conclusion of how this looked down in here. And we'll head back over to TradingView here to show you this, because I'll put us on replay right here. And that if we kind of look at how this all looked in here, it's that you would pretty much draw out the same conclusions that you have currently going on in the market right now. That, man, this thing looks bearish as can possibly be. And that while we're looking at prices currently and saying, man, this sure does look awfully familiar to what happens before these things just start tumbling their way down again. Well, one could draw that same conclusion about what was happening here at the actual bottom of Bitcoin back in 2015 as well, because it's what we were having happen over again. And we can actually grab the fractal that was occurring right in here that led to an additional plunge to make us think that, hey, we're actually doing this thing all over again. And this is actually going to end up breaking down and it's going to end up crumbling once again. It plays out a little bit. Yup, not looking good. This thing looks exactly like what happens before it eventually really kerplunks. And let's grab that. Grab it one more time with the breakdown. And we'll stretch it out in there to say, this thing looks awful. But what ended up happening after that was additional accumulation taking place in here. Looks like it's ready to go, but suddenly we go the opposite direction, and that was the end of the bear market. However, the structure at the bottom was identical to the one that actually led to the capitulative move. But what was interesting about it was that it held that level right there, right? It held like what we're talking about right now for Bitcoin would be like that 20,700 level. Then finally, it kerplunked right through it. And then right back up and accumulated for weeks on end afterwards before finally turning up in a Wyckoff spring final ending accumulation phase. So the challenge with this as well would be that if that's true, right? If this is like some shortened Wyckoff accumulation that's happening in here, obviously it's significantly shorter from a time perspective of how the last Wyckoff accumulation played out for Bitcoin after we spent like literally like pretty dang close on the amount of time it took for this to come down. Are we really going to finish Wyckoff accumulation happening right in here in this short of a time frame? Or is this more of like a modified one of these that just doesn't have as much juice in it to do the same thing? Are we really only about 1/3 of the way through the accumulation in here? And that's the hard thing to guess here with this structure that we have happening in here. It's unlike any type of bottom that we have seen previously. It doesn't have the same juice in it to get enough strength to really pop back up first. So if we're really Wyckoffing in here and we're just only like a partial little ways through this thing, right? And here we go. We just took this kerplunk really at the same timing of when we took that one. How long could you see that thing dragging out for, right? You could go on for a long time without ever setting a new low and still keep on Wyckoff accumulating in here for a long time. So that's still a challenge that we're facing here, trying to figure out, is the bottom coming in here right now? If 20,700 holds in here and it does do that short squeeze right back up, in each of the structures where I've seen that happen, the thing rolls over and we're still in a super long bear market to come. But even in Wyckoff accumulation, we could have multiple things happening in here. It could be that it's at the final phase of the Wyckoff accumulation and then ready to rip and roar, or that we are merely 1/3 of the way through the accumulation in here. We just haven't had as much juice for bouncing in here, maybe due to a lot of the stuff that we saw happen in this market that was pretty scary with USDT depegging, UST, Luna, both of them going to zero instantly. Three Arrows Capital, all the companies that were involved in that who had to liquidate all of their Bitcoin, Tesla liquidating. Is MicroStrategy going to be liquidating with the changing of the CEOs? Who knows? Hard to say. That's all speculative stuff, and I have zero way to know that, if that's why we haven't shown as much juice in here. But either way, from an oversold standpoint on the weekly RSI, from a fractal standpoint, from an all-time high standpoint, from a Fibonacci standpoint, all these things point to that the bottom is already in. The bigger question is this the end of a 5-wave cycle for Bitcoin, where this is wave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which I've shown several times that this is now the third time we have had a run of this length. So wave 1 being equivalent in size to wave 2 or wave 3. And then here we are on wave 3, that what happened here, the 2017, 2018 top was merely just this pit stop along the way. And then this was the reach out for the final wave. So this is wave 5. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where do you head to after you do these 5 waves? Typically you head way down here. So Are we going to hold here? Are we going to work our way up here? And this was actually the end of a significantly long bull run for Bitcoin that's got to go back down to $2,000. Or are we in the midst of Wyckoff accumulation right here? Are we in a shorter, more compressed Wyckoff accumulation? Or are we in a longer, more drawn out Wyckoff accumulation? I think the answer to whether or not we're heading up here to reverse over like this has to come pretty soon. On Friday, we're going to be getting the Federal Reserve Chairman speaking from Jackson Hole in Wyoming, giving kind of an update on everything. I think the market's kind of paused out, waiting for that moment. I think we're going to see all the action in the market probably come on Friday. Will that be where we get a move like this? Or do we see something more the lines, boom, and then it pauses out in here? If we get something like that, I think that kind of answers our question on, saying, hey, that's not really what's at play here. Now we're saying we're in Wyckoff accumulation. Then the bigger question comes, are we at the ending phase of Wyckoff accumulation, or are we still going to be in this thing going on for a much longer period of time, and that we're only a couple months into this thing and it doesn't even show us popping out of this range that we're in until spring of next year, March of 2023. Either way, none of these scenarios that I have present a new low getting put in, which I think is what a lot of bulls actually want. I've been trying to wrap my head around why are there so many bears out there? And I think we're seeing typical psychology of what is actually happening in the market. I think what you have is you have a lot of people who sold out of the market and they want to buy. They're actually bullish on Bitcoin, but they want to buy lower. I think that's really all it is. I don't think there's really a bunch of people out there who are bearish on crypto and bearish on Bitcoin, wanting it to actually smash into the ground. I think they're actually just looking for one more dip to buy it. They sold down here and now they're waiting for one more dip to get it. And I don't think that's going to come. Anything is possible, but you're asking an awful lot of the market. You're asking it to deviate away from fractals. You're asking it to break its previous all-time high on the market cap. You're also asking it to break through its Fibonacci retracement level of a 0.786. You're also asking it to behave differently of when it went into oversold on the weekly time frame every time. That was already the bottom. So you're asking it to behave differently than that. And you're asking it to behave differently from a fear and greed standpoint, that anytime we spent a prolonged amount of time in extreme fear, even back in 2018, once we were able to pop out of that extreme fear, the bottom was already in. That happened in 2018, and that happened in the C19 time period. That happened back there in May, June, and July of 2021 with the China ban, Elon Musk FUD, USDT FUD, all that stuff. Once we popped out of there, the bottom was already in. And we've already spent our prolonged amount of time in extreme fear here and popped out. In each circumstance where we spent that much time in extreme fear, the bottom was already in. So you're asking for this to be different too. You're asking for this to be different from oversold. You're asking for all-time high to break. You're asking for fibs to break. And you're asking for fractals to break and ending capitulation phases to break as well. You're asking for something very different to happen in the market that has happened previously. Could it end up being right? Of course it could end up being right. But the only thing I can do is look back to all the different things that have happened in this market to build the best case to try to make my best educated guess. These are all the things that I have to make my educated guess. If the only thing people have to make their educated guess is this and someone on Twitter telling them, we've got to dip down to 15 to 17K and that's the bottom, that's where you buy it and that's where you YOLO. I just hope you have good precedent for that, because everything is going to break. If we dip down to new lows, everything's going to break. And I just don't see that happening. So I think these theories, these ideas that I'm playing with seem the most likely to me, or else I wouldn't talk about them. I think, as long as we're holding 20,700, that still this idea of it working its way up here and Bitcoin's in a long bear market still seems very logical and realistic. But if we pause here, then it starts becoming, or if we dip below 20,700, it starts becoming, hey, what's happening for Wyckoff accumulation in here? Is this going to be drawn out for several more months, taking us into 2023? Or was this the final ending and spring of Wyckoff accumulation? So those are kind of my thoughts. And I think we're going to get the answer on the 20,700 by Friday. I think we will. So I don't think we'll have to be kind of like presenting the guesswork on this any longer. It'll be one way or the other. It'll be like, all right, too many things have happened. If we dip down in here, it'd be like too many things have broken based on what we've seen for something like this to actually happen. And it'd be more talking about Wyckoff accumulation. It'd be talking about whether or not, are we in a shorter, more compressed Wyckoff accumulation, or are we in a long, drawn out one that is still behaving on the same kind of time scale as we've been operating on so far, and that we're just going to kind of hang out at these lows deep into October. And I think on Friday, we'll kind of get that answer. I think there will be volatility in the markets through Friday, but these are all the things I'm looking at. I built all the cases on why I don't think the new low idea is really plausible without catastrophic damage to the chart. And while I do understand this looks bear flaggish, I also wanted to present in here to show you how this bottom came in here, and that these things looked nearly identical in here. If you were going to use that same idea to say, hey, it looks the same, so that means it must break down. But it wasn't true. One of the things, though, so we're talking about, hey, could this accumulation take a long time? Could it take into March of 2023? The one thing that makes me not lean towards that, even though, you look at the fractals, you say, look, it's behaved on the same kind of time scale this entire time, ever since the very big top of it came in back in April of 2021. It's operated on the same time scale. Why wouldn't it, right? It would make the most logical sense to say it's just going to keep going at the same time speed. Is this Bitcoin dominance, in that it is creating a structure that we can reference back to on several different charts that show that this is kind of like the ending, and this is where the dominance really breaks down. And in the circumstances of the past of when Bitcoin's dominance has broken down, it has only broken down in two different circumstances repeatedly. One of them is when Bitcoin is breaking out into a new all-time high, which would be this moment right in here and this moment right in here. Both of these are the moments at which the Bitcoin dominance starts to break down. The other circumstance is when Bitcoin's going back into a retracement. So in 2017, as Bitcoin's breaking out into a new all-time high, the dominance falls, then it pauses until Bitcoin hits its new all-time high, crashes, and into the retrace. That's when the dominance makes another big fall. What we had happen in Bitcoin so far is as it broke out into a new all-time high, the dominance fell, but yet we never got another move, right? We haven't seen any type of retrace come in for Bitcoin. We haven't seen the dominance fall as well. So the circumstances we have to look at to say that the dominance can fall, if we go just based on those data points that we have, it's that one, Bitcoin's got to be breaking into a new all-time high, or Bitcoin's got to be going back into some kind of retrace. If we're talking about it going into 2023 or going into March, that means it would sit here the whole time all the way to March. That, I think, would be odd for it to stay down here that long. That is a long time for that to sit down there. I couldn't imagine it. It feels like it would break down much sooner than that, in which the dominance of Bitcoin would be falling into a retracement or Bitcoin breaking into a new all-time high. I personally don't think it's going to be when Bitcoin's breaking out into a new all-time high. I think it's more likely into a retracement just based on my speculative assumptions of the market. And I couldn't imagine it lasting all the way until March for that to occur. But if we did, right, if we did last all the way to March until when something like that could happen, what would that be? It'd be a retrace back into the retracement levels when, the altcoin market would run with it. But judging from time scales of how these structures play out, that sure does go on quite a bit longer than we should be going. So it just doesn't seem like it to me. It seems like it's more likely that we have, either 20,700 holds, we pop up, altcoin market runs up into that retracement rally, or we're kind of finishing and wrapping up Wyckoff accumulation sooner. Time will have to tell. Once we get through Friday, we can kind of have a clearer picture of at least being able to eliminate specific things. But if this structure is true here on the dominance and that the dominance is going to fall, that sure seems unlikely. And based on the conditions of Bitcoin's requirements is that it's only happened in new all-time highs and only happened into retracements. That's a long time away, and that just doesn't seem structurally sound. So that's a conflict I have with saying we're going to take all the way till March to do it. So video is getting kind of long. Just kind of wanted to go into all the things that I'm seeing and thinking as we're sitting here still waiting on Bitcoin to make a decision. Still holding 20,700. Still, this is the same structure that I've seen multiple times that does just go up and then right back down. That's my base case, so long as we're still holding 20,700. But as we try to pass time waiting for it to make a decision at this point, I figure we point out all the different things going on in the market. Lots of cases for people saying that we're going to break into new lows and then they plan on buying that new low. Even though I present all these things showing that, hey, we've finished fractals, we've back tested the all-time high in the market cap, we're at the last Fibonacci retracement level, we're at oversold conditions, fear and greed index popped out, all these things that say the bottom is already in, doesn't mean we can't go break below them. But my argument is if we do break below them, I think that's a scary moment in the market. So it's either that there's something actually broken in Bitcoin, it's broken in this market, or this is the bottom of the market. And I think the cases out there, which I'm presenting to you, you decide whether or not they have validity to them. You can assess all that and say none of that matters. That's just silly. I think the stock market has popped and the whole thing's fallen. And you know what? That's a fair enough assessment to make if that's the one that you want to lean on. But these are the ones that I'm looking at. This is the case that I can build, and that's how my opinion is formulated. The market will say who is right in the end. But after sitting down here for 5.5 days, those are my thoughts. That's what I see going on in the market. And those are the things that I've noticed over the last several days. Hopefully it sparked something in your mind, and to each their own. But all right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. Still waiting on this market to make a decision. Again, Friday's the big day. The market is highly anticipating this Friday when Jerome Powell is going to speak at Jackson Hole. And it feels like a lot of the volatility will be coming by the end of the week. So on that note, I won't be making a video tomorrow. I have a lot of things going on tomorrow. Even if Bitcoin dips below 20,700 or if Bitcoin fires up to 24,000, tomorrow there won't be a video, but I'll be over here on Twitter and I'll post about it if either of those end up happening. Otherwise, I'll catch you guys again on Friday. But till then, I hope that you have a wonderful week. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.